we maintain the Register of Aboriginal Land Claims. I'll actually start on the right of that photo. So Morris Stewart, who's here today, has been with the Registrar's Office for a long time. He is supports around queries around membership. So Morris often goes out and meets with boards and members, answers queries from members of the public around joining land councils and those sorts of matters. So, and he's currently working with NSWALC on developing a guide around membership to give greater support to land councils. I'm very conscious that decisions around membership are actually some of the biggest decisions that land councils make. Next to Morris is Megan Memberson. She's been with the Registrar's Office for a long time too, and her work is primarily in the area of Aboriginal owners. So we maintain the Register of Aboriginal Owners across New South Wales. It's currently just over about 1,000 people, and it involves really important rights in terms of joint management and return of land to Aboriginal people. So. Next to Megan is Jane, who I'm sure a lot of you, Jane Madden, a lot of you would have spoken to. Jane fields all of the inquiries we get related to land councils and works really closely with the zones around that. I'm going to talk a little bit further about that later. Next to Jane is Tyson Towney, who's recently joined the Registrar's Office, and he's providing support around our land claims. Next to Tyson is Jodie. Jodie's our administrative support across the whole team. Next to Jodie in that photo is someone who came to our office for a short time, had previously worked at NSWALC. He's not with us anymore, but he did a short-term contract with us to help us around land claims. Troy Lancaster, who a lot of you would know through NSWALC. So, and then myself. We've developed a strategic plan that's been sent out to all land councils, and it's really just to help explain what we do and how we do it. And we've sought feedback on that plan. If anybody wants to discuss aspects of it, I'd really like to. It's important that we're accountable to the network. The draft plan sets out our key strategies and objectives in relation to our areas of business. So in relation to land claims, Aboriginal owners, governance, compliance, inquiries and complaints, membership, and also advice to the Minister for Aboriginal Affairs. The plan's available on our website. We've sent it out, but if anyone wants to talk about it, we can do it today, or we can also organise to chat about it another time. In terms of key strategies for the next year, we're looking at doing an update to the Aboriginal Land Claims Register and the ALA Register. Really important that we bring our systems forward. We're doing an upgrade to the Aboriginal Owner Register. We've already started implementing a new inquiries and complaints system, and we're also looking at doing an upgrade to the consolidated membership role. So there's some big projects ahead for us this financial year. Next thing I wanted to talk about was about good governance, so some of the values of good governance, and the visual I have there is a heart, because I think at the heart of an organisation is its values, and I think it is reflected in everything that a land council does. Some of you might have seen this list before, but there's some of the values of good governance. So participation, fairness, transparency, accountability, performance, leadership, and a really important one, respect. That's often talked about in the network. In my opinion, all of these values are reflected in the governance system that's in the Aboriginal Land Rights Act, and I see them demonstrated across the network constantly. The next diagram is another diagram that we often use, talking about the layers of accountability within the land rights system. At the core, Aboriginal people of New South Wales can become members of their local Aboriginal Land Council. Those members appoint the councillors of the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council. They also appoint their boards. The boards appoint the chair, and the board also appoint the CEO, and all of those layers of accountability within the system. The green bubbles around the side are some of the external bodies that also have oversight of land councils, so including the Registrar. Next thing I wanted to talk about was inquiries and complaints related to Aboriginal land councils. And if anybody's got any questions or comments as we go along, I'd really appreciate if anybody wants to do that, we can do that. So, and particularly when we come to talking further about the Code of Conduct, we're here today to get input from the network. So, the visual I have there is a road and a pathway. And I guess what we wanted to talk about is how we approach inquiries and complaints related to land councils. So I just want to start by recognising all of the work that the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council does in terms of providing day-to-day assistance and support to local Aboriginal land councils. The zone staff do an incredible job across the state providing that support. We work really closely with the zone staff around these matters, and both NSWALC and the Registrar's Office has functions in terms of conciliating, arbitrating and mediating disputes relating to the Aboriginal Land Rights Act. We work really closely with local Aboriginal land councils to support compliance. Wherever possible, we try to assist local Aboriginal land councils to resolve issues at that local level. We're in the process at the moment of implementing a new inquiry. So we get hundreds of inquiries, mostly telephone, but some by email, inquiries related to local Aboriginal land councils. It might be from members, it might be from board members, people that want to join the land council. We get all those inquiries. We're implementing a risk management approach to how we work with those matters. So the first question we tend to ask someone that contacts our office is, have you talked to the land council, either be the chair or the CEO, and what did they say? Because sometimes they'll come straight to the Registrar's Office and they haven't yet had the conversation at that local level. So where it's appropriate, we'll send that person back to have those discussions with the local Aboriginal Land Council. The next thing I wanted to talk about is in relation to some of the complaints that we get relate to allegations of misconduct. But what I want to say at the outset is just to acknowledge that the vast majority of the network of incredibly hard-working, dedicated people, they're observing, so the board members and staff of land councils, they're observing, they're acting in the best interests of their land council and they're observing those high standards of conduct. I just want to acknowledge that. We do get allegations, related to board members across the network. When we're talking about misconduct, the Act provides a scheme for addressing those matters, and misconduct is defined as a contravention of the Act or the regulations, a contravention of a code of conduct, which we're going to talk about further today, or an act of disorder at a meeting. Some common allegations, and I say allegations carefully, of misconduct are things like disruptive behaviour at meetings, breaches of confidentiality, conflicts of interest, including pecuniary interests, and unauthorised and damaging public comments, including by social media, which I think is an emerging area for land councils to think about. The Land Rights Act provides a range of possible remedies for misconduct by board members and staff, and it's very similar to the regulatory scheme in the Local Government Act. We've got a bit of a flow chart here to kind of demonstrate the process a bit. So it starts with an allegation of misconduct. What we recommend you do is seek advice from the Registrar's Office, and or the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council. Most of the time you would have already spoken to NSWALC, but we encourage you to get that advice early in the piece. Then decide about what the intended outcomes are and what pathway needs to be taken to get there, and we're going to talk about this further. And then use a fair and well-documented process for the chosen pathway. I'll explain further why, but it's actually really important to do that. And then get your outcome that you're seeking. I want to start by saying what we're actually seeking are outcomes in the best interests of the Land Council, and outcomes that will resolve issues for the long term for your Land Council. So I've got a diagram here, it's a bit complicated, so I'm going to break it down, but basically it tries to graphically represent the various pathways that are available in terms of allegations of misconduct in the Act. If I can run down that left-hand, I think I've got a side, they're the beginnings of the pathways. So the first one is dispute resolution, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but I actually think that's the most relevant pathway for land councils. Then there's also about a disciplinary action pathway. We've got the New South Wales Civil and Administrative Tribunal pathway, NCAT. There's also the censure pathway and dismissal provision, which we're going to talk about in depth later on. The vast majority, of disputes or allegations of misconduct, I believe, can be sorted out through dispute resolution, provided that those allegations don't relate to serious breaches of the Code of Conduct or corruption. That means that they can be resolved at that local level with support. In terms of possible remedies under the Act, we've got a diagram there to kind of show the various options that are available under the Act. In terms of dispute resolution, there's some examples given there. It's not all of them. Things like an apology, an agreement to reimburse for any loss, additional training, or a resignation might be an outcome. Things like a warning or a censure motion. Also available is a dismissal provision in that next column. Disciplinary action by the registrar. There can be formal counsel or reprimand, formal conciliation, a recommendation that the Land Council take certain action like training or further support, suspension up to 6 months. Sometimes people think that the registrar can remove board members. That's not the case. It's suspend for up to 6 months. And the registrar can also refer matters to another authority for consideration. In terms of disciplinary proceedings in the New South Wales Civil and Administrative Tribunal, they have broader powers, similar to the registrar, but they can also disqualify for up to 5 years, order the payment of a pecuniary penalty, like a fine, of up to $11,000, and also seek an order for reimbursement for loss incurred by the LAUC. There hasn't been yet a matter go to the New South Wales Civil and Administrative Tribunal. In terms of dispute resolution, which is that first green pathway up the top there, which I think in most cases is most relevant, the chairperson plays a critical role. They play a critical role in every land council, but around this in particular, they play a very critical role. They provide mentoring and support for the CEO and for board members. The CEO also plays a critical role in terms of supporting the chair and mentoring staff. NSWALC provides that day-to-day assistance and support to land councils and can mediate, conciliate and arbitrate disputes, and also the Registrar's Office. I just want to do a case study now, just to demonstrate some of the principles that we've been talking about, and I'm happy for anybody to jump in with any comments as we go. I want to say at the outset, this case study is fictional. It's not based on any particular land council or actual events or persons. If there's any similarity, it is accidental. So, yeah. Okay, so I'll start with part one. Alan is a respected elder and has been a member of Blue Sky Local Aboriginal Land Council, it's a made-up one, since its inception. Alan has served on the board as a board member since 2008. He joined the board, or I should say 2009. He joined the board as he's passionate about culture and heritage protection. At a recent members meeting, Alan questioned why the new Cultural and Heritage Officer, Jason, has not done anything about illegal dumping on the LAUC's land. What I'd say is that's a big issue for a lot of land councils. Julie feels ambushed, by Alan and does not know how to respond. The chair of Blue Sky Local Aboriginal Land Council, George, feels that Alan's comments have undermined the members' confidence in the Land Council and caused the Office of the Registrar to get advice about the process for passing a censure motion against Alan. Does anybody have any comments at this stage? Okay, part two. After discussions with the Registrar and the NSWALC Zone Director, George and Alan agreed to participate in conciliation to try and resolve the issues. As a result of these discussions, it becomes clear that the new Cultural Heritage Officer, Julie, is the niece of the Chair. Alan feels that Julie is not experienced enough to take on such an important role, but did not feel comfortable raising these issues because of that relationship to the Chair. Julie and the CEO of the Land Council are currently in discussions with OEH about the illegal dumping on the Louts land, and Julie did not feel that she could comment about these matters because she was concerned about prejudicing the investigation and possible prosecution in relation to the dumping. Alan feels that the board is not being kept up to date in relation to culture and heritage matters. So the conciliation process has really identified some of the underlying issues that are causing some of the tension there at the Land Council level, I'd say. Part 3. As a result of the conciliation, the parties agree Alan will apologise to Julie about his comments at the members' meeting and offer to support her in her role. The CEO will ensure that there are regular updates to the board about culture and heritage matters. All board members, including Jeff, will agree to keep these updates confidential. And the CEO and the board will develop a communication strategy for providing information back to members about culture and heritage matters. And the Chair decided not to proceed with the censure motion. The idea of that case study is to just demonstrate that sometimes that dispute resolution process and the conciliation process can actually identify some of the underlying issues and actually get to a point where all of the parties can move forward with an outcome that's in the best interest of the Land Council. In that matter, so, there was an allegation. They got some advice and support from the Registrar and NSWALC, and then they chose a pathway to try and get an outcome. And again, what we're trying to do is seek outcomes that are in the best interest of the Land Council in the long term. The censure motion, sorry, I've got a question. Thank you. Hi. Good, thanks.
Hello. G'day. Hi, how are you? I'm Noel Downs, Wonnarua Local Aboriginal Land Council. Just a couple of questions. The original meeting that it was raised at was a members' meeting, not a board meeting?
Yeah.
Where was the CEO? Well, my first question is, well, that's the CEO's responsibility to answer that question, not the Cultural Heritage Officers.
Yeah.
The relationship to the chair is unimportant it's only important if the chair is participating in a conversation about employment or payment or something to do with the Cultural Heritage Officer, which is, again, the CEO's responsibility.
Yeah.
I actually think that was a really poor process that they went through.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because I also think that it demonstrates some of the issues that come up when board members raise issues at members' meetings. Because obviously the board member could have asked questions around these matters to the CEO at a board meeting and had those discussions, but when they're raised at a members' meeting in that way, the members are looking to board members and assuming that they have a lot more knowledge than the rest of the members.
But most of that attack, although, as you said, the board member felt that he couldn't raise an issue because the Cultural Heritage Officer is related to the chair, again, it's a conversation between the CEO and the board, not the...
I agree. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I agree with that. Does anybody have any other comments they want to make about that scenario? There's all sorts of things contained in it, so... might. Yep, are you good to go?
On the slide,
Yep,
sorry,
Yep.
on slide 1,
yep.
he was asking the question. So where's the breach in slide 1? All he was doing was asking a question, so I'm just trying to figure out where the breach is.
Oh, good. Thank you. Sorry, I couldn't see where you were. Sorry about that. I apologise. Where's the breach? I guess part of the, there's nuances in these situations. The fact that the Culture and Heritage Officer felt ambushed by that, I think, again, it demonstrates the fact that when board members speak at members' meetings, it's different from a general member of the public speaking, because it's assumed that they have a level of knowledge. I also think it demonstrates the fact that for the staff members of local Aboriginal land councils, it's a workplace for them, as well as, quite often they're also a member, but it's a workplace, and how they're treated in that workplace. So again, that comment that was made before, the CEO is responsible for staff. So if there's concerns around stuff that's happening with staff, that really, hopefully from a board member's perspective, should be being raised through either the board member contacting the chair and having those discussions, or with the CEO directly. Have we got any other comments about it? So, sorry, the question was, what's the breach? It's not clear in this example. Yeah. Yeah, keep going. I might hand over to Dom now, unless we've got further discussion around those matters. But I really want to encourage land councils that if you are having issues or you have concerns around the conduct of board members or staff members, to have discussions, first of all, with the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council zone staff, but also feel comfortable to contact the Registrar's office so we can talk through things. Because sometimes what happens is that land councils will go down, for example, the censure route, which is, available under the Act, but there is actually a process that's required to ensure that it's done validly. So there needs to be procedural fairness given to the affected board member or staff member, and it has implications. But I'm also concerned about the long-term impacts of that route on the relationships. People are members of their land council, they serve on boards and they do an amazing job. The impact of a censure motion on the individual can be long-lasting. So I think talking through the various options that are available and the support that is made available to board members in those situations, and also support to the chair and CEO. Yeah.
Nicole, Councillor for the Northwest, one of the things that I see more and more common, and I don't know if the registrar's actually looking at how we can address it, but it's about Aboriginality. People are joining or trying to join a land council around Aboriginality. And members are unclear and unsure about that process. And, is the registrar, are we actually going to look at how we support land councils to address these matters? Because it's not about membership to allow and participation, it's about confirmation of Aboriginality, which is a growing issue right across our state.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Dennis, I appreciate it. I want to acknowledge that I think it's actually one of the biggest issues for the network. We are constantly getting inquiries and complaints related to these matters, and it's a source of tension in communities, and it puts a massive burden on land councils. Even just before coming in here today, I was chatting with some people from the network around these issues. In terms of what we're doing to try and support the network, Morris Stewart from our office is our resident membership expert, and Morris is, we've got one person, so I would love to have a whole team out there, but Morris has some really important conversations with land councils around these issues. We're also working to develop a guide around membership Registrar's Office and NSWALC working in collaboration to give that support to land councils. It is a massive issue. So, decisions around who the members are of a land council, they're the most important decisions that you'll make. But then again, this other issue around and the linkage between membership and Aboriginality is a big one. So yes, I'm very conscious that there needs to be more support for the network around this.
Yeah, Mitchell Neve. If you're trying to control a board member, then down the track that board member gets disqualified off the board, say, at a period of 6 months, and that board member then attends a general meeting and cause nothing but problem. I know it's a member's decision to get rid of them, but I think it should be a speedy track there. If she's qualified for 6 months, it should be 6 months from the land council, not 6 months, not as a board, because they're going to cause a lot of problems for that 6 months. Thanks.
Yeah. Managing that kind of disruptive behaviour.
Rosalind Gardner from Deniliquin. My biggest gripe is the Registrar's Office not returning phone calls and emails. I sent in 4 emails last year. I received an email from you to say, yes, I have received it. Sorry it took so long. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. I'm still waiting.
I want to acknowledge that our response times are not where I'd like them to be. I acknowledge that. One of the things that we're doing at the moment with implementing this new systems around inquiries and complaints is actually getting some statistics around how many inquiries and complaints we receive and how many we're able to resolve. And I've talked to NSWALC about this, but we don't have currently enough staff to deal with the issues that come in a timely way. We're constantly having to address the most urgent matters first, but it depends on how much information we have as to an assessment, and that's part of the reason why we're also implementing that risk management approach. So I'm not trying to make excuses here. I'm saying I hear what you're saying and I acknowledge that. I'm doing my best to try and get more resources so we can do a better job.
Pam Andy from Dandenong in the Far West region. Dale, you talked about the Aboriginality linkage, right? What about the linkage to the boundaries that were set up by State Land Council around the jurisdiction? Because we have got members that's in Queensland, Victoria and so forth, which is actually out of the boundary. So is that going to be considered? Because on the form it say that you've got to reside within the Land Council boundary.
So I think...
Or have association.
Yeah, so in terms of seeking membership to a local Aboriginal Land Council, obviously either residing in the area of that local Aboriginal Land Council, or if you reside outside of that area, for example in Queensland, it's up to the members to consider, does that person have a close association with that area? So in terms of the boundaries, that's something...
Needs to be clear. If you're going to develop and implement that guidelines for the members, right? It needs to be clear within it.
Yeah.
Okay. Because otherwise, we'll end up with any Indigenous people sitting on our board, as members. Yeah. Rightio, because the Aboriginal's gone out now. It's Indigenous. Everything is Indigenous.
Yeah.
So every black skin be part of that membership.
They're giving further guidance to different land councils around what association means. Be something we'll include in that guide. Yeah.
Got it?
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, hello.
G'day everyone. Acknowledge we're standing on Wonnarua Country. Hi Nicole, Nathan from Metro. I'd just like to ask 2 questions. One particular one about the recent removal of a member for fraudulently claiming to be Aboriginal in their application. Are they being referred to the Department of Public Prosecutions for fraud?
Are you talking about a matter that happened during the former registrar? I just want to make
Without
sure.
naming names, saying a former applicant at Coonabarabran Land Council is removed by the prior registrar, are they going to be taken for fraud? because we're aware of benefits that were gained on the basis of a fraudulent application.
Okay. I'm going to sound like a lawyer for a second, Nathan. I'm not going to comment on that matter lest prejudice any investigations and prosecutions that may occur in that matter.
Possibility something's going to be done about it? There will be a ramification for that fraud? Those decisions will be made by other bodies, but it's not something I can comment on because of the... Generally, if someone's fraudulently found to be claiming to be Aboriginal, proven not to be, is that not just straight fraud dealt with by the police?
There could be criminal implications for a person. I'm not talking about that individual matter here. I just want to be clear. Again, I sound like a lawyer, but I have to be careful around these things. If somebody claims to be Aboriginal and it's proven to be false, then there could be, particularly if they've gained a benefit from that situation, there could be criminal offences committed as a result. So
that's really good to hear, because our Land Council's held 2 forums now on the issue.
Yep.
We had the registrar at the time present to us and confer to us that someone had been removed. But we've seen no action. And unless there's reactions for actions, you're never going to get nowhere. And we're going to see a lot of these gammon people getting away with it, sadly. And the last point is will anyone, be it not just yourself or the State Land Council, hopefully put out that we're going to end stat declaration identities to receive benefits?
There is a big discussion going on at lots of levels at the moment around these issues. So it's, you know, I guess I've got to be careful about what hat the registrar wears, and you know, people may seek the views of the registrar's office. But yes, I think these matters are being discussed, and Morris attended one of the forums recently. I'm really interested to hear those discussions, and also, you know, it's something that I can speak to the Minister for Aboriginal Affairs about. So. I think it's a big issue. I agree. Thank you.
Nicole, Greg Peterson, CEO of NARA.
Hi, Greg.
If you could just outline to people 2 things. What you see as an appropriate process for a land council to actually get their own model rules. And the last one is, of course, you know, we've had our bumps in the road. Those matters can become highly complex legal matters that end up in court. A land council is ill-afforded to go down that track. So a normal process within the Act, a board or members are trying to put in place, then suddenly becomes exchanges between barristers, and it steps completely outside of the Act. And it is an absolute frustration for a land council to say, well, where to go to next?
Comes at a massive cost to the individuals involved.
Yes, it does. Even if you were to use Justice Connect, the party costs are huge.
Yeah, and in my view, I don't think that the legal system is well designed to help resolve these issues necessarily in the best interests of the Land Council with long-term outcomes. So I agree with you there. That was part of the reason why the focus today was talking about dispute resolution and what support can be given at that local level to first deal with matters early in the piece so these things don't snowball, which they do tend to do. And we can try and avoid litigation wherever possible because it comes at a financial cost but a personal cost to the network.
Well, I suppose the thing I'm drawing attention to is Section 1775, which allows a land council to develop under procedural fairness a set of rules that are really about the behaviour of board members, which at the present time is sort of missing.
Yep, so that's actually the next topic that we wanted to talk about. So thanks, Greg, it leads in really well. I just want to check that we don't have any further questions about the other topics that we talked about, but what we wanted to talk about now was about the Code of Conduct development, which Greg has just asked about. Sorry. Thanks, Tony.
Hey, Nicole, how are you?
Hi, Tony. How are you?
Good. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Yeah, I've heard a little bit about membership and about identity.
Yeah.
My question is, when a person does become a member, an Aboriginal identified person through the members become a member in a land council and they look for their identity, who do they go to? Because we've had this conversation in our LALP about we're a statutory body, do we have the right to give them their identity? Is that the case, though?
Yeah. So I'm really conscious that these questions and issues around Aboriginality and identity are really sensitive. And Morris is offering to discuss this because I'm not Aboriginal myself, and I'm happy for Morris to.
I just want to understand your question. Like, is it that before they're a member or after they're a member? After they've been accepted as a member, like, due diligence should have been shown by the members and the Lands Council. Sorry, to make sure that that person is an Aboriginal person and accepted by the community. There's parts in the legislation that says that this is what you can and this is what you are to be accepted as a member. If you follow that process, then there shouldn't be an issue. If a person gets through, then the onus is on the Lands Council. And once they're a member, then they're entitled to get a confirmation of membership from that Lands Council.
Can I make a...
That's the question I'm asking. I know that they're entitled to get it, but who gives it?
Yeah.
That's the question I was asking. And if we can do that as a LALC, then that's what we'll do. Thank you.
Chairman, can I answer that in a way that's not being disrespectful to the question that you're asking? Let's be very clear. When it comes to Aboriginality, it is you and our land councils that make that decision. And that's one powerful decision that our community, our membership, have control of. Let's not go down the path where we're given that power to either the Registrar, which has a certain power under certain provisions to be able to do that, but that waters down that process. Let's not give it to government agencies, and let's not give it to others, tick a box to say, tick this box and you're a blackfella. Now, what I'm really concerned about, and I'm being open, honest and upfront, is that our members are really starting to feel guilty now to say no against people that are coming in for membership. You'll get the strong membership LALCs that say, well, no, I'm sorry, you need to go back where you come from, with all due respect, and surely people must know who your mob are somewhere, and then come back with that paperwork of some sort. That's the process for me. But what I'm seeing slowly since 2007 in our land council system is people that are coming in, and Metro Land Council have taken the bull by the horns and have confronted this thing called Aboriginality. Now, we can be up in the Hunter Valley for another 5 days talking about this, but at the end of the day, I think it comes back to our local Aboriginal land councils and our members to be strong enough to say, well, that doesn't sit right with me. And we know, seriously, honestly. And if I'm saying the wrong thing, then please get up and tell me that I am. But we know who is and who isn't. And I've sat in meetings myself where I had to abstain because of that very issue. And Nicole, it's becoming out of control, and I think I've been lobbied as the chair of NSWALC to do something. And us as a council really are led by our local Aboriginal land councils. And we have no control over membership. That is a responsibility of our local Aboriginal land council members. And I think Morris hit the nail on the head in relation to your question, Chairman. All that stuff should have been done before he or she got to the land council. And there's no law to say that you can't accept someone's membership because they haven't provided enough evidence. And I think we need to start getting stronger to say, well, you know what? This is getting out of control. Stop it. See you later. Or we have to have a look at some other way. And I'll just quickly close. Sorry, Nicole.
Thanks.
I was in Sydney and someone come up to me and said, why can't whitefellas be a member of a land council? I said, what? And then I thought about it. Can they become non-voting members, or not non-voting, what do you call it, associate members, similar to a club, where that way we build up the membership, we build up the numbers within our land council. And it's not I thought it was a stupid question, but when you think about it, we're getting these people that have only just found out who they are. They're coming in anyways, and we're accepting them, and they're coming into our membership as voting or non-voting members. So this issue is not going to go away, and I think, James, if you're in the room, it's something that council have to grapple with, and we've got to work out a solution that makes sure that we are kept in control of this process. And it's so difficult for members now, because they're put in a difficult situation where they're made to feel guilty. That's just my view.
Nicole, do you want me to respond to the chair?
Sure, yeah. Please do.
Firstly, there's two things here, and I think the first one is really important. It's once you've accepted a person, they're a member of your Lands Council, and I think the members need to be made aware of what their roles are in it, you know, what the criteria is, and make sure that the applicant meets that criteria before you even... And I don't understand why you feel guilty about refusing someone. I mean, at our Lands Council, we don't. You know, if the person doesn't meet that criteria and it's not known within the community, and his family's not known, then they've got no association with that area, then we refuse it. And it's a matter of the members being aware that this is what their responsibilities are. So, I mean, like, you know, and we're working with NSWALC at the moment to do a guide to get around to the Lands Councils, but there's, as Nicole's always said, like, you know, like, we're only a small office. We haven't got the finances and the staff to get around. So we're working in conjunction with NSWALC is going to be a massive difference to us. And the other thing, Mr. Chair, about associate members, I'm not too sure how that's going to affect and how people think about that. I think it's a different forum altogether. But I mean, a member of a Lands Council is a member of a Lands Council, an Aboriginal person, and I think that's the way it's set up. And unless you're going to change the legislation, I think that's the way it should stay, personally, as an Aboriginal person. But there's certainly room for debate. But with the membership stuff, I think it's the more that members are aware of what power that they have, that's the determining thing. So we're trying to get around to as many Lands Councils and meet with the boards, the CEOs, and then the members, and then, you know, have a robust discussion about what we think membership is.
Thank you, Morris. We've got a question.
Just on that point, Morris. Just on that point, if an applicant for membership is denied, do they have a right of appeal?
The answer is yes, there are legal options available, and it's actually an area where we're starting to see more interest and legal action happening. So it's part of the reason why I think we need to get more support out to the networks. I guess I see it as the more that land councils are doing in their communities, and then the more community benefits that are flowing from those land councils, the more I think this issue is, you know, more people are going to want to join those land councils. So there's, you know, a big pressure on the system. It's partly a product of the success of the land council network. But what we want to do is get the advice and the support to land councils to get good, strong decisions made that are documented properly, that are supported. And then if we do get challenges to them, then we won't end up with bad case law. So. I'll just take one more, if that's okay, because this lady's been waiting a long time, and then I'm going to hand over to Dom to talk about the Code of Conduct.
Thank you, Nicole. I don't want to cut into the last session. I am the CEO of our Land Council, right? We have a performer set up, and it was given to me by another Land Council. It's actually a performer that's set up to implement part of a policy for membership. We also, when we give out membership forms, we also give out a stat deck that we've developed from the previous Land Council where I've got it from. So people, I explained to them that they have to get this stat deck signed before their membership comes back. Now, a lot of black fellas and white fellas know that a stat deck is a legal document. So if they don't get it signed, we say, well, they didn't really want to be a member of the Land Council. They're lying in that aspect. You also got to remember there's 3 criteria that members have to fulfil the obligations of memberships. We have a whiteboard in our meeting room, so every time membership comes up, that whiteboard is flipped. And now my members are mainly elderly that come to our meetings and some young people. And we always explain to them that they must fit the 3 criteria to be a member of the Land Council. And because that last criteria says is if the members agree, they are a member of the Land Council. So if the members agree that they're a member of the Land Council, all paperwork sent through the Registrar. As soon as I get confirmation back from Morris, I send a letter of membership to the new applicant. If they're not approved, those people then get a letter from the Land Council, and if they need further clarification on the issue, they can contact the Registrar's office. I think it's ironic that, I'm not digging at you, Roy, but you make a comment about non-Aboriginal people. In the last 2 years, non-Aboriginal people have been cut out of the funeral fund. Now, those people have lived with these black people for years and years and years, and they're not entitled to that anymore. The other thing I'd like to reiterate on is we now have a community benefit scheme, and it's for members only within our Land Council. Yes, okay, we're going to be inundated for membership, but it's up to the members to approve them. And when people come back and say, but I'm Aboriginal, I say, look, it's not my decision, it's the members that make this decision. We've denied members to be of the Land Council who have family who are members because they don't identify in the community. We live in a community of 7,500 people, so people know people. I have, you know, my husband's family who have applied to be members, but because they haven't identified over the years, they're not entitled to be a member of the Land Council. So Land Councils need to consider all those things that you have in place and all those things that people are going to benefit from. If people know that we have a community benefit scheme that's set up for scholarships for school kids, you know, that sort of thing, we're going to be inundated to have members, but it's up to our current members to make those decisions. I have one elderly member who, back in the day before, you know, those pending applications, no date of birth, she is so regretful now that she ever passed this person as an Aboriginal person. Even though he's only a pending member, he's never reapplied to have his membership up. This man sits in a position in New South Wales and has a job of $190,000 a year. He never identified as being black. I could come to you and say, we need an investigation, just like the previous registrar did. I think it's disgusting that people can come through the system and get that sort of thing. We grew up as black people. I lived on the riverbank in a tin humpy, no electricity. I know I'm black because it's in here. It's what's been instilled in us. So when people come in and get a membership form from us, and I'd like to thank Andrew because that's where I got my performance thing from and my stat deck. He helped me in a way. So we do a process. It goes to the board. If the board think there's not enough information, it goes back to that person. If the board can't make a decision whether it's enough information, they pass it to the members. Simple little things like that make your membership work. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. Because of time, we are going to have to wrap up this part. I really want to make sure that Dom gets a chance to talk about code of conduct. The role of the Registrar's Office is around maintaining that membership role and providing support to land councils to make sure that the decisions around membership are made in accordance with the Act. So I think there's some really good practice already existing within the network, as you've mentioned, and what we'd like to do is to see some of that experience shared through land councils. So that's really our focus for the next little while. The concerns raised about fraudulent claims and those sorts of things, it's not something that sits squarely in the registrar's role in terms of the comments before around criminal offences and those sorts of things, but it is a big issue out there. So, yeah, I'm going to hand over to Dom. This next topic is really important, I think, for all land councils because the Code of Conduct reflects the values of the organisation. It also sets the standards in terms of how board members, staff and members engage with their land council. So I'm going to hand over to Dom.
How long would you like me to speak for, James? 1 second?
Well, it's saying time limit exceeded 4 minutes and 38.
Yeah, it's feeling a bit like a Mission Impossible movie.
You do what you can do within the time. You just do your best.
Okay. Well, if I could just begin by paying my respects to elders, past, present and future. But with that, leap straight into what Nicole asked me to speak about today, and the work that I've been doing with the Registrar's Office, which is working on the development of a model code of conduct. Obviously, there is a model code of conduct in Schedule 3 of the regulations already, and that's the code of conduct that most LALCs are using. That applies by default. The Act does say, however, also that the Registrar can develop a model code and that the LALCs may choose to adopt that. The project which Nicole has got me engaged on is developing a model code which can be adopted by LALCs, more or less as it is, but also one which allows room for LALCs themselves to tailor the code of conduct. Nicole has pointed out the great importance of values at the heart of every organisation, and one of the things that it's hoped that that this model will do is provide space for the LALCs to develop their own statement of values, and also clarify then how those values fit into the rules and standards which are contained in the code. Just going back to that last slide, one of the impetuses for this is that I think it was correctly pointed out by ICAC last year in their report that more can be made of the code of conduct if the LALCs themselves feel that they take ownership of it. So a model which allows room for LALCs to adapt a pro forma to their own circumstances more easily than the model code which is in the regs will hopefully help with taking things in that direction. So really, what will be in this model code, and how will it be different to the model in the regs at the moment? One of the things is that it's said in the Act, and many people have pointed out that the Act says, well, there's to be a model code for members as well as board members and staff, and of course the model code that's in the regs doesn't apply to members at all. So we'll develop something that can be applied to members as well. The model code, new model code, I think will also, as I've said, include space for LALCs to develop a statement of their own values. It will also hopefully provide a bit more guidance on what is meant by the various standards and rules which are set out in it. I think the current model code is it's pretty bland. It states in general terms duties such as a duty to act with honesty, diligence and care. Not a whole lot of guidance about what that means and whether the situation which is just emerging within the LALC fits within that standard, or whether it's a breach of that standard, or what. So hopefully there'll be some greater guidance in the model which is developed to help LAUCs with that as well. Also, I think one of the things that emerged from Nicole's talk was, and particularly one of the slides, was the bewildering range of options there are that face a LAUC every time an issue comes up, of which pathway do we take. And it's hoped that that the new model code will provide some good guidance around that as well, some suggestions and some suggested pathways and so on, for how breaches or suspected breaches of the code can be enforced. And lastly, and a very big topic obviously, is the fact that there is no dismissal provision in the model code that's attached to the regs, and the Act makes provision for one. I should preface this by saying I personally think it's quite a tricky space to get into. One of the difficulties is making sure that when you state the rule, that a breach of that rule will lead to dismissal, that you state it properly. It's quite a big consequence for both the person being dismissed and for the LAUC as a whole. One of the important things about the board election procedures is to provide stability for the LAUC. And obviously, if it's easy to dismiss individual members, then and if that were to become something that was resorted to often, that would really undermine, I think, the stability of the community and the stability of the LAUC's governance system. I am very interested in hearing from different LAUCs today what they think are the standards that, if they're breached, should lead to dismissal. It's easy to say, well, bad people should only be able to go so far before you say enough's enough and you can't be a board member anymore. It's quite hard to, I think, identify, well, what are the lines that, if they're crossed, should allow the members to dismiss a person. One of the things I suppose that we think of is if somebody's blatantly stealing from the LAUC, most people would not argue with the proposition that they should be able to be dismissed. Perhaps another similarly serious breach might be a physical assault in a meeting. That might also be something that you just say, well, sorry, you've crossed the line, and you should be dismissed from membership for that as well. But we don't really have time, but in the time that we don't have, are there people that want to make suggestions about what are the situations that should lead to dismissal and that should be able to be stated in the model code? Yeah.
Who are effectively supplying affidavit which is against the interests of the LAUC. At NCAT, at anti-discrimination, etc., and after being requested to stand down, won't. And that ended up being a case that had a huge pecuniary interest problem, conflict of interest problem, and is ongoing.
Yeah. So is that a situation that should enable dismissal, you mean?
I would think absolutely. Yeah. It's very unfortunate, but legally, you know, it has ramifications at all levels within the LAUC.
Yeah.
The unfortunate thing is public comment is probably our worst thing. Look, we all tell tales, we all tell stories. Being community, people talk about things. But the question I wanted to ask was, really simply, that would be, from our LAUC's perspective, a reason for being within the model rules, actually having it there, that if you're engaged, at least standing down would seem to be a reasonable request.
It's very difficult to comment directly on something like that because there are so many things still to know about what you're describing, and if it is an actual ongoing case, then that's something that I'd be pretty hesitant to start to weigh into because I don't have any background in it, and it's not really my place to do it either. But obviously, looking after the interests of the LALC, and board members and staff members do owe duties of loyalty to the LALC that they belong to. And you would expect to see that reflected in the code of conduct, and in extreme cases maybe there is a situation where that should lead to dismissal. I'm being told that I've completely run out of time, unfortunately. That obviously it was a really there's much more that we could talk about. I'm going to be around, and I would say please to people, let me know your ideas, let Nicole know your ideas on the development of a dismissal provision. It's something that could be left out of this new model code, but obviously there's something there in the Act, and probably a good opportunity, I think, for the Registrar by publishing a model code to give some guidance about what a dismissal provision might look like.
I just want to reinforce that although we haven't had much time to talk about it today, it's really opening a conversation. So please make contact with Dom and I today or later, contact our office. We'd like to hear from the network about what's important around this because it is a really important area. It's all about helping land councils with their governance. So thank you for your time today. I apologise that we've run over, but the questions and comments are really important. So thank you.